Spanish ham is in the news again, and this time it's not what you think. The other day, The Guardian up in the UK published an article. The long title, Spanish jamón is the best ham in the world, but culture warriors are reviving its dark history. The author is Abbas Asaria, a Madrid-based chef and food writer, and the dark history in question has to do with the politics of pork. For hundreds of years, as you probably know, most of Spain was under Muslim rule. When the natives rose up and began to push the colonizers off their stolen land, they, the Spaniards, pursued their ideological enemies with zeal, a struggle known as the Reconquista. This process took centuries, and there's a lot one could say about it. Today, we're going to talk about jamón ibérico, Iberian ham, and how the Spanish Inquisition might be affecting your diet, even centuries after the fact. Hey everybody, it's Daniel. Welcome back to Spain to Go, the best podcast in the entire multiverse for all things Spain. This is episode 131, and I am thrilled to be here. In fact, you have not truly lived until you have spent an afternoon researching Spanish ham as a tool of social exclusion. Today's episode is about the dark history of jamón ibérico. If you would like to donate to this podcast, head over to expatmadrid.com/donate. expatmadrid.com/donate is the donation page. You can donate anything from 10 euros on up to however much you want. Actually, I'm looking at the prices of Spanish ham right now, and it's not like I have a lot of space at home to just have a leg of ham sitting around. But if you wanted to donate 385 euros and 50 cents, with that, I could get a 100% acorn-fed Iberian bellota ham. Bellota is the acorn. It's a class of ham. You know, the pigs walk around under the oak trees. They eat acorns, but that's barely even the topic today. Anyway, head over to expatmadrid.com/donate and send me anything from 10 euros on up to 385 euros and 50 cents or more. I won't complain. I will give you a shout out on a future episode if you donate, and I will, of course, appreciate it until the end of time. Thank you very much. Let's get back to jamón ibérico and its history as a tool of social exclusion, with a bit about the Spanish Reconquista. Muslims and also Jews were driven out of Spain in 1492, the same year that Spain became a global power due to the discovery of a hitherto unknown new world by one Christopher Columbus. Whether Columbus was Spanish or Italian or Catalan or something else is a boring debate I'm not going to get into here. In any case, his voyage across the Atlantic was funded by the Spanish crown. Ferdinand and Isabella, otherwise known as the Catholic monarchs. The title Catholic monarchs is important because part of the goal behind expelling Muslims and Jews was to enforce religious unity in the new Spain. The Reconquest was considered by several popes to be part of the larger movement of the Crusades. Organizations like the Knights Templar were involved in both the Holy Land Crusades and the Spanish Reconquista. El mundo es un pañuelo, in other words, and the Catholic Church was doing globalization for more than 1,000 years before the term was even invented. But let's talk about the politics of Spanish ham, because, as I was saying, in 1492, Spain was, after centuries, mostly united as a collection of Catholic kingdoms all the way from the Pyrenees down to the southern coast. This is all part of the origin story of Spain as we now know it. The struggle against Muslim invaders is a huge part of traditional Spanish identity. Later, the Spanish Inquisition pursued Moriscos and Conversos, Muslims and Jews who had, in theory, converted to Christianity to blend in, but whose loyalty to God, Spain, and the king was still suspect. Muslims and Jews don't eat pork, but Christians do, so eating pork in public became a sort of ideological purity test. In other words, ham is political, and so are bacon and chorizo and pork rinds. In theory, the tradition of hanging hams and sausages in prominent places comes from that time. Hang a few kilos of pork in the window, and the neighbors will assume you're a good Christian. Maybe the Grand Inquisitor will leave you alone. Put a row of hams up behind the bar in your tavern, and everyone will know which side of the culture war you're on. But what does that have to do with today? Well, apparently there's a meme going around on the Spanish internet, and it's ruffling feathers among certain groups. Come jamón? It's a simple question, often accompanied by a picture of an angry Homer Simpson. It means, does he eat ham? In the online culture wars, come jamón is a loaded question. If someone posts a surveillance camera video of a couple of young men robbing an old lady on the streets of Barcelona, for example, someone could chime in with, come jamón? It's a cryptic way of asking if the perpetrators are Muslim, based on the assumption that immigrants from Muslim countries commit a disproportionate share of the street crime in Spain. That's what the article in The Guardian is about, the history of ham as a symbol of Spanish identity and, in the author's words, a tool of social exclusion. I had never seen the Come Jamón meme, but I'm not really on the dark and hairy underbelly of the Spanish internet, so I guess it's normal that I wouldn't. But I do have something to say about food and fitting in to your social group. I have mentioned this elsewhere, but I used to be a vegetarian. I know. It wasn't because of animals, it wasn't because of the alleged health benefits. Basically, it was because vegetarian was just something everyone was doing in my social group back in the US. This says a lot about my social group back then, and had I known better, or had the people skills, I probably just would have made different friends. But as it happened, for the people I was hanging out with in my teens and early 20s, vegetarianism was quite mainstream. If you wanted to be a bit more extreme, you could go vegan, or you could be a raw foodist, or a macrobiotic, whatever that means. I just wanted to fit in. So for 3 or 4 years, I was a vegetarian. The first Spanish girl I ever dated, who was inevitably named Maria, wasn't a fan of my vegetarianism. You won't even try jamón ibérico? She would ask, incredulously. It's the peak of our civilization. Her grandparents had lived through some real hunger after the Spanish Civil War, and my sitting around objecting to perfectly good food was, in her mind, ridiculous. I later decided that she was right. And that is why the Chorizo Chronicles is not a blog about celery. Maria dumped me after 3 or 4 months of dating. We were totally incompatible, and my stupid diet was only the tip of the iceberg. But soon after, I discovered the wonders of Spanish cuisine, especially pork products. Among the several reasons why this blog is called the Chorizo Chronicles is the fact that when I started it around 15 years ago, I was already embracing pork as a part of my budding Spanish identity. I also no longer had to fit in with the people back home, who loved to lecture me about how meat is linked to cis-heteronormative masculinity vis-a-vis the patriarchy. All this to say, food can be political, and it's not just Spanish ham. By the way, I am now, many years later, fully Spanish, and it just occurred to me that the logo for this podcast is a pig. How about that? It's almost like pork is a symbol of Spain or something. Let us now talk about the Reconquista and Spanish identity. You remember Torre Pacheco last summer, or actually you probably don't, but in that agricultural town in Murcia, a couple of young people of North African origin, de origen magrebí, as they say in Spanish, beat up an old man and filmed it for viral content. What followed was a pretty tense July weekend in which far-right activists went down to protest in Torre Pacheco, calling it a hunt for immigrants. In the end, it seems the police stopped any more violence from breaking out, But the tension is indicative of a larger problem in Spanish society. Not everyone is on board with mass immigration from Africa, and some want to take the matter into their own hands. The author of the article in The Guardian laments that for some Spaniards, the Inquisition hasn't ended. I think you could phrase that a bit more generously and say that if your country shares both land and sea borders with a different civilization, there are bound to be certain types of friction. But in a way, he's right. For a lot of people, Spanish identity is tied up with a history of conflict against the Moors. It's a historical fact, and it's not likely to be forgotten anytime soon. A guy at my gym has a large tattoo of the Virgin Mary on his left calf and a kneeling Templar knight on his right. This stuff isn't a joke for a certain demographic. I wrote an article a while ago about symbols of Spain and mentioned in passing that most modern Spaniards want nothing to do with their own traditions. I suppose this is happening all over the West. Celebrating your national patron saint means you're a far-right extremist, the flag is fascist, and everyone outside the big cities is a racist. Or so they say. Here in Spain, actually, a lot of towns, especially in the area of Valencia, have a local festival, which is Christians versus Moors. Moros y Cristianos, it's a thing. People get dressed up as Moors or as Christians from the 12th century or whatever. They have mock battles. The Christians win, because that's history, whether you like it or not. In the future, all heroes will be canceled by the online mob, and 100% of public statues will be abstract iron monoliths, or just empty stone plinths. This is already happening here in Barcelona and elsewhere. What can we do, though? The past was ugly and full of conflict, and the future looks, from some angles, less than bright. But at least we can lean into an inoffensive present in which everyone is safe and nobody's feelings are hurt by ideas or traditions that were fully mainstream before the year 2012. Eating Spanish ham is still okay because ham is delicious, as long as you're not eating it politically. Make sure your ham is merely nutritional and not a tool for social exclusion. You don't want to end up like I have on the wrong side of history. That's about all I've got for today. I hope you're having a great day wherever you are. About being on the wrong side of history. That was episode 128. If you would like to have a listen, episode 128. My wife Morena had some interesting comments about this topic because in her country, India, she's from a class of people who eat beef and, any other kind of meat. But they're still practicing the caste system in India to some extent, and the upper class of Indians are vegetarian. So in India, vegetarianism is a tool of social exclusion, and the people who eat meat are considered to be sort of, lesser by the elite classes. Also, if you want to play this game, champagne and caviar are tools of social exclusion because not everybody can afford them. So I don't know, you can look for the original article on The Guardian up in the UK if you want. It doesn't say much that I haven't said here. If you would like to learn some Spanish, head over to YouTube. Learn Spanish with Daniel. Learn Spanish with Daniel is the best channel on YouTube for learning Spanish. You might even be listening to this podcast on YouTube. Learn Spanish with Daniel is the channel. Just check that out if you're into it. I teach grammar, vocabulary, and Spanish culture on there. Also a bit of pronunciation. It's fun. I enjoy it. It's also free. If you're tired of getting free stuff from me, head over to expatmadrid.com/donate and send some money. expatmadrid.com/donate. I have a real job that's mostly unrelated to this, but if you help me out with some donations, I can spend more time making podcasts and such. That is expatmadrid.com/donate. The blog, expatmadrid.com, otherwise known as The Chorizo Chronicles, is pork-themed, or at least the title is pork-themed. I talk about a lot of stuff on there. Most of the articles on there make it onto the podcast eventually, but I've got stuff about travels to the US, for example, that I can't think of any good reason why I need to put my trip to New York on a podcast called Spain to Go. So that one, for example, is not here. If you would like to know more about what I'm up to, my usual cultural and philosophical musings, expatmadrid.com is the place for that. You can follow me on Instagram if you would like. I am Daniel Welsh over there, WELSCH. You can send me a message in various ways. You could go to expatmadrid.com and enter your email in one of the spaces for that purpose, and I will send you updates when I have them. That's a great way of keeping in touch also. If you're moving to Spain at any point, let me know. I would love to meet you. If you're traveling in Spain also, just hit me up. I'm happy to meet up for a coffee. I'm usually in Barcelona these days. Anyway, that's that. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Have a great day wherever you are, and we will talk soon. Hasta la próxima. Bye.